Hey guys, welcome back! Let's continue to dive into my favorite DOS games year by year, and let me tell you, 1992 was a terrific year in PC gaming, and it's all just getting started. So, are you ready to discover my 10 most played DOS games from 1992 that indeed grabbed my attention? Let's take a look. Bear in mind that for this one, I had to leave out of the top 10 games like Dune, The Humans, Curse of Enchantia, Goblins 2, A Train, Lure of the Temptress, Quest for Glory 3 Wages of War, Star Trek 25th Anniversary, and Ultima 7 The Black Gate. All these were that close to be promoted to this year's top 10, so consider them as honorable mentions. With that said, let's begin!
Comanche Maximum Overkill.
Comanche Maximum Overkill is the first helicopter simulator to showcase Novologic's voxel engine, which renders organic and lifelike terrain and realistic-looking objects that no other game using polygons could match, and, along with all that, features the Army's experimental RAH-66 Comanche light attack helicopter. The addition of voxel space was indeed groundbreaking. It was the first time DOS gamers were given fully illustrated environments within which to fly. Shadows and reflections moved in realistic relative sync with the pilot and in relation to a natural light source. There are over 20 scripted campaign missions and features a simple flight model and allows the player's helicopter to take much more damage than it could in reality. Additionally, weapons on the Comanche feature deadly accuracy and power. It was originally developed and published by Novologic for DOS-based computers, with 2 expansion packs coming later down the road, Mission Disc 1 and Over the Edge. Also, a compilation titled Comanche CD was released in 1994 that included the main game and those 2 expansion packs. By 1995, that compilation was released for Mac OS, simply known as Comanche Mac. A port of the game was in development for the Super Nintendo using Super FX and was even displayed at 1995's E3, but was eventually cancelled. A Nintendo spokesperson said that the project was aborted because of unresolvable difficulties within the game's graphics and speed.
Ultima Underworld, the Stygian Abyss.
Ultima Underworld, the Stygian Abyss is commonly considered the first role-playing game with fluid first-person movement in a real 3D environment. Unlike earlier first-person RPGs such as Dungeon Master or Eye of the Beholder, the player can move in every direction and the graphics are updated continually. The player is also able to look up and down with the press of a key, jump and swim. The dungeon is not made entirely of corridors and rooms arranged in a rectangular fashion, but has a lot of variety: slopes, stairs, bridges, underground rivers and more. It was a technological masterpiece that pioneered many of the first-person elements that would soon show up in Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. Underworld: The Stygian Abyss was not a first-person shooter, but rather a deep and immersive role-playing game set in the long-established Ultima universe, and the excellent music and sound effects further added to the feeling of being in the game. It was undoubtedly the most atmospheric RPG of its day, and my most played and beloved game in a genre that I would abandon a few years later. The game's combat system is action-oriented. The player has to draw his weapon, aim at his opponent, and hold the cursor over the game screen to inflict damage. The longer the player holds it, the stronger is the attack. Some weapons have different types of attacks, depending on where the cursor is held. For example, jabs are executed when the cursor is near the bottom of the screen, while slashes are performed with the cursor in the middle. The game's background story is standard stuff about rescuing a damsel from the depths of the dungeon, but once inside the Stygian Abyss, all manner of subquests and conversations with the non-player characters contrive to add deeper layers to the initial plot. Control of the game is quite simple, and although fighting plays its part, you'll also need to use your head, to bypass the various tribes of the Abyss, like learning the phrases of the lizard's language, for example. Underworld is a large game with many hours of play, and if you can look beyond the rather pixelated graphics, it still provides a great gaming experience today. It was even given away for free in issue 74 of PC Gamer magazine back in July of 2000, along with 11 other masterpieces. Strangely enough, by 1997, a Japan-only PlayStation version surfaced with improved monster graphics and redone title music.
Dyna Blaster.
It was first released for the PC Engine in December of 1990 under its original title, Bomberman, soon followed by the release of its North American TurboGrafx 16 counterpart in early 1991. European computer enthusiasts would also start enjoying it still in 1991 with the release of the Amiga version and under its European name, Dyna Blaster. MS-DOS-based computer users would only start messing around with it by 1992, but this concept came a truly long way, written as a tech demo for Hudson Soft as far back as 1980. 3 years later was further developed and released for several Japanese computers from NEC, Fujitsu, Sharp and the MSX, and by 1984 that MSX version was brought to Europe under a different name, Eric and the Floaters, simply to avoid any association with a series of terrorist bombings carried out by the Irish Republic Army. It was also published for the ZX Spectrum by Sinclair Research in that same year, so with all that said, I can safely confirm that this new 1992 version is a remake of the original created over 10 years prior. But where Bomberman truly gained notoriety was on the Famicom, and by 1985 being ported back over to the MSX the following year as Bomberman Special. The Famicom version only left Japan by 1989, which was kind of strange, just a few months before this superior version landed over the PC Engine and TurboGrafx. Dyna Blaster consists of 9 levels per stage, each tougher than the other, and each final one consisting of the boss that will have to be dealt with. The Bomberman character can move horizontally and vertically and lay down bombs behind him, thus destroying the enemies, but beware! Bomberman can block himself with his own bombs and thus become a victim of his own strategy, something that was demonstrated on an episode of the UK TV show Games Master, when the 5 members of the pop group Take That played it as part of a challenge. Yes, 5 players playing the game simultaneously, but in this particular case on an Amiga 600. And guess who won? Yeah, Robbie Williams. This was possible due to Hudson Soft's venture with NEC back in 1990 in the development of the TurboTap accessory for the PC Engine and TurboGrafx, later porting that multiplayer mayhem to other systems. The DOS version would only allow for 4 players to battle themselves simultaneously, which was more than enough from where I'm standing.
Crazy Cars 3.
Now for a racing game, a genre that you know that I'm completely crazy about. So, talking about crazy, here's Crazy Cars 3 from the French developer Titus. If you remove the U from the Titus, you get... okay, never mind. The Crazy Cars series was part of my gaming life since the glory days of the ZX Spectrum, where I played the first 2 games in the series. We just have to floor our way through in these illegal street races, overtaking all cars and trying to reach the main rivals in front of the pack, so that we can arrive in first place and win all the money in stake from the bets placed before the race started. It's that simple. We start out with just a basic Lamborghini and $6,000, and the aim is to rise to the top of the 4 divisions of racing through success on 60 racetracks across the United States. In each division there are 20 rival racers, up to 3 of which compete in each race at a time. The races also feature lots of local drivers, Sunday drivers going at normal speed, and police. Before each race we can be told of the quality of the locals and the likelihood of police presence. Crazy Cars 3 was upgraded and released a year later on a bunch of other systems, having also a name change, Lamborghini American Challenge. Titus managed to grab an official license from the manufacturer of the iconic Lamborghini Diablo and packed also a ton of improvements along with it, like changing the training mode in the original game into a much desired split-screen 2-player mode. So awesome!
Wolfenstein 3D.
A classic among classics, and you can confirm that simply by checking out the price of a sealed big box copy available on eBay. And this one is the CD version released a few years later. Holy crap! Wolfenstein 3D is an episodic first-person shooter and a follow-up to the top-down infiltration game Castle Wolfenstein, originally released back in 1981 for the Apple II. The game puts us in the boots of B.J. Blazkowicz, an Allied spy. There are 6 episodes, the first distributed completely free as shareware. That was my first contact with the game. The second and the third episodes were available after registration, and the 3 final missions, which happened before the events of the first episode, were available in the Nocturnal Missions pack. Each episode has 9 levels plus a secret level activated by a hidden switch somewhere in the 8 first levels. Regular levels often feature a maze-like appearance or large areas with many enemies where we must reach the exit elevator. To do so, we must kill the enemies and, depending on the level, activate push walls and or get silver and golden keys to open certain doors. Many objects can be found in a level, from medikits, chicken meals, dog food and even puddles of blood to restore health, to ammo and treasures. These solely exist for points. There are 4 weapons, all of them using the same bullets, except the knife, obviously. The knife and the pistol are given at the start of the level, while the machine gun is either found mostly in secret areas or picked up from SS troopers, and we must use them to slay all 5 kinds of enemies present in the game, 6 if we include the bosses. We start the game with 3 lives. Once we lose the last life, the game ends. To win extra lives, we have to either find a 1-up item in the level or get 20,000 points. Wolfenstein 3D takes place during World War II, but the enemy soldier getting knocked down by Blazkowicz on the box cover of the game is carrying an M16. That weapon didn't exist until 1960. Yeah, here's one more proof that Nazis did some time traveling back then and got some help from a more evolved species from the future.
King's Quest 6. Here today, gone tomorrow.
I will always recall this 6th entry in the King's Quest series with huge nostalgia, cause back then, me and 5 more friends saved money for months to buy the original boxed DOS version. So in late 1992, and after playing a pirated copy of the previous title that was mentioned on my video about my 10 most played DOS games from 1990, the 3D graphic intro movie, the professional voice acting and the multiple routes through the story overwhelmed us all. It just blew us away. Obviously that we needed to make copies of the original floppy disks so that each of us would play it and share experiences, helping each other's advancing through the story. Every day at school we would gather around and talk about each other's progression, and this was how we shared walkthroughs in early 90s, yeah. We would even draw sketches for the puzzles and take photocopies so that when we got home, could advance a bit more. It was the first point-and-click graphic adventure that I played on my brand new IBM PS1, with sound coming only from the PC speaker. Sound cards and a pair of speakers were so expensive back in those days, you know, a luxury. So my first playthrough of King's Quest VI was done entirely using the internal speaker of my IBM that gladly had this pretty handy volume knob so that I could play the game all night long without my parents noticing it. King's Quest VI brought huge improvements to the series, and to my eyes, could finally rival the latest Lucasfilm and LucasArts graphic adventures with its awe-inspiring visual beauty. An amazing experience that brings so many awesome memories. Like its predecessors in the series, King's Quest VI Here Today, Gone Tomorrow is a third-person puzzle-solving adventure game where we, as Prince Alexander, must travel between the land's 4 magical islands, each based on myth and fables, and encounter people and strange beasts that will either help or hinder him. And why must we do that, you may ask? Because of a girl we met in the previous game, Princess Cassima. It had to be. Later, a CD-ROM version of the game arrived that included both DOS and Windows versions, along with full speech, a pre-rendered introduction, and the Girl in the Tower theme song that could be heard for just 5 seconds on the floppy version. Obviously that this one would be among my favorite point-and-click adventure games ever. Feel free to check my top 10, link in the top right of the screen and in the description below.
Now you die!
Microprose Formula 1 Grand Prix.
Already out for the Amiga since November of 1991, Microprose Formula 1 Grand Prix dropped like a bomb on all MS-DOS based PC's hard drives. Even if you weren't into racing games or even into Formula 1, you most likely played this one back in the day. I was never that much of a fan of Formula 1, but I can recall 3 or 4 titles that I truly enjoyed playing throughout the years. Geoff Crammond is a legend when it comes to designing and programming sim racing video games. After Stunt Car Racer, we could only expect the best. And that was exactly what he delivered, the best Formula 1 game and racing game for that matter until that moment. So 1992 started with a bang with this incredible and accurate representation of the 1991 Formula 1 season, even if the game itself was not affiliated officially with the FIA or any Formula 1 drivers that obviously had fictional names within it. As said, the game is a simulation of Formula 1 racing from that period of time and was noted for its 3D graphics, remarkably high frame rate, around 25 frames per second, and attention to detail, in particular the player's ability to edit the teams and drivers and set up their car to their own personal specifications. So, and along with Indianapolis 500
From Papyrus
that I mentioned in my 1989's top 10 video, Formula 1 Grand Prix was the second racing game to implement something that resembled real-world racing physics, accurate track modeling, and car handling that required a nails kit, somewhat similar to real-world driving skills to perform well, along with meaningful options to tune the behavior of the cars. Although not quite on the level of later simulations, the most important variables such as gear ratios, tire compounds, and wing settings were available to tune and, more importantly, proved to make an actual difference when driving. Important were also the functional rear-view mirrors and an instant replay system with a wide range of adjustable camera settings not seen in other games of that era. A truly groundbreaking game that resulted in a huge commercial success that spawned 3 sequels: Grand Prix 2, Grand Prix 3 and Grand Prix 4. Yeah. How can such a small and simple game be so addictive and on my top 3 most played DOS games from 1992? Beats me! What I know is that it grabbed me right in the first seconds of gameplay. Was developed by EgoSoft for the Commodore 64, Amiga and MS-DOS and is known to be a lunar lander and space taxi prehistoric clone, where we control a muscle-powered helicopter kind of elevator, and to make some money for our future wedding with our pretty lovely cave girl, we have to transport passengers from one place to another, yeah. Each level is made of a series of platforms with several cave entrances. Cavemen walk out of the caves and loudly announce where they want to go. we have to land our helicopter taxi next to the passenger and wait until he crawls inside, and then fly to the cave that he wants to get to. Controlling the vehicle is a bit complicated. We cannot directly fly up or down. Instead, we have to keep pedaling to fly up and cease pedaling when we want to go downwards. Bumping into a wall too hard will cause the game over and force us to restart. There is also a time limit for each level, and we'll get extra bonus points for getting passengers to their destination before time runs out. At the end of each level, we'll be given a code for keeping track of our progress. There are some dinosaur adversaries on certain levels, a pterodactyl which appears unexpectedly and flies across the screen, and a triceratops which becomes agitated when we land near and charges at our taxi. Not mentioning the T-Rex that is sleeping and blows our vehicle with its nostrils. As we pedal, we exert energy. To refill our energy so that we can keep pedaling, we can pick up a rock with blinking eyes and toss it at a tree also with blinking eyes, making a fruit to drop down. So let's eat it to replenish our energy. Also available is a very entertaining two-player cooperative mode, where we and our cave buddy will most likely fight for the passengers rather than help each other. So addictive!
Dune II.
Dune II Battle for Arrakis, or the building of a dynasty in the US, was first released for DOS, followed a year later by an Amiga port, and by 1994 a Mega Drive Genesis release. It is often considered the first mainstream modern real-time strategy game and established many conventions of the genre. Even though set in Frank Herbert's famous Dune universe, the game is only loosely connected to the plot of any of the books or the films based on them. Controlling either of the three houses, the player must fight a number of battles against the other houses. In the early levels, the goal is simply to earn a certain number of credits, while in the later missions, all enemies must be destroyed. The single resource of the game is the spice, which must be collected by harvesters. The spice is converted to credits in a refinery, which are then spent to construct additional buildings and units. There are two terrain types. Buildings can only be constructed on stone, while the spice is only found on the sand. However, units moving on sand attract the large sandworms of Dune, who are virtually indestructible and can swallow even large units whole. As levels progress, new and more advanced buildings and units are made available, including structures like a radar station, a repair facility, or defense turrets, and for units, various ground troops, light vehicles, and tanks. Each house can construct one unique special unit, and after building a palace improvement, can unleash a unique palace effect. After a mission is completed, we can select the next mission on a map of Dune. This choice determines the layout of the next map to be played, but has no effect on the overall campaign. A largely unknown but very curious feature in Dune 2 is that a small amount of credits is frequently subtracted from the player's budget, the amount directly proportional to the current power consumption in the player's base. Westwood Studios was really thinking ahead when creating this masterpiece of a game.
Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
You've already noticed that I'm the biggest Indiana Jones fan out there, and the Fate of Atlantis should be turned into a movie and remastered for current-gen systems. Damn, I even went on national TV stating that.
A Fate of Atlantis é daquelas histórias que deveria ser convertida em filme. É simplesmente soberba.
Screenwriter Al Barwood, that would return later to also write the story for Infernal Machine, another one of my all-time favorites, wrote an amazing plot centered around the lost continent of Atlantis. I've forever been intrigued with Plato's amazing Atlantis dialogue, so The Last Crusade was begging for a sequel, and it eventually arrived first in 1992 and a year later with an enhanced CD-ROM version which included amazing voice acting and digitized sound effects. I still have my kicks re-release of the game in all its glory. It offered an overwhelming and original story that can rival with the ones from all three first movies. The fourth one is quite forgettable, and the fifth could have been so much better. Just saying. So Nazis, a sort of mythological flavor, and a beautiful and somewhat annoying female character were the perfect ingredients for an Indiana Jones adventure. Sophia Hapgood would return later for Indy's first 3D action adventure, the aforementioned Infernal Machine, released in 1999, and that I have also reviewed in the past. Check my playlist of all Indiana Jones video games that I've covered throughout these 10 years of content creation here on YouTube. Link in the usual places. Needless to say that later I would also grab the GOG and Steam versions to play again and again and again. Damn! I completely lost the count of how many times I've played and finished The Fate of Atlantis. It still has the power to hold my attention hostage, like if there was no tomorrow. And let's not forget that this game has 3 different approaches to the story, with the in-game dialogue and storyline being cleverly adapted to each situation, which I found truly groundbreaking at the time. As the name suggests, we take control of the famous archaeologists in a frenetic race against the Nazis to be the first to unveil the secrets and whereabouts of the lost civilization of Atlantis. The action takes place in 1939, when Hitler's foes are searching for an ancient Atlantean power source that will potentially supercharge their tanks and bombs. So off we go on a globe-trotting adventure, which manages to capture all the action, humor and undertone of the movie franchise, with John Williams' intemporal soundtrack playing in the background.
I see the left horn.
A variety of compositions were arranged by the iMuse team, Michael Land, Clint Bajakian and Peter McConnell, and the fact of not being based on any of Indy's previous movies gave loose rein to Hal Barwood and his team to create this unique, inspiring and original story. And let's not forget that this game was included as an unlockable extra on the Wii version of Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings, released back in 2009. All these years later, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis refuses to die, and I'm crossing my fingers in relation to the upcoming indie game from Machine Games. I'm sure that I will love it, no matter what, cause as I said in the beginning, I'm a huge fan of the Man in the Hat, and everything that comes out that is even slightly and remotely related to indie, I simply have to check out. That's why the Tomb Raider and Uncharted series are so dear to me.
I'm Indiana Jones. Who are you, Buckethead?
Buckethead? What kind of insult is that?
I'll let Sophia explain it to you.
Indy!
Nice work.
So guys, here you have it, the 10 games released back in 1992 that I spent the most time with. Tell me down in the comments section below if you've played any of them, and feel free to share your personal favorites from that particular year. I would love to know, cause I'm sure that I'll discover a ton more by reading your feedback. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this episode, you know the drill. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in my next video. Cheers!